In today's video, we are going to be ranking the 7 kingdoms in Game of Thrones from the most horrifically unlivable to the best to live in. Coming in at worst, at number 9, we have the Riverlands. Under the right circumstances, the Riverlands are probably great. In the spring, they probably have lots of delicious Tully trout swimming around in the streams and flowers that bloom along the riverbanks. The problem is that the people who live in the Riverlands hardly get to experience that because the place is located smack dab in the middle of the other kingdoms, which means that whenever any of them go to war, the Riverlands turns into a battlefield. It's hard to appreciate the flowers when you can't smell them or unburied corpses. The Riverlands are ruled by House Tully of Riverrun, of course, but they are far from the only notable houses there. As we saw in House of the Dragon, the Brackens and Blackwoods, with their long-standing feud, live there, and the Freys also. Unfortunately, there's quite a bit of turnover. The cruel Harren the Black once ruled from Harrenhal before Aegon the Conqueror melted the castle with his dragon Balerion. House Strong commands the castle now in House of the Dragon. But to top it all off, the weather in the Riverlands is often really dreary. Lots of it is rain, gray skies, and it's a lot like England if it were being ransacked every few years by invading armies. At number 8, we have the Iron Islands. If you've ever wanted to live as a medieval ocean raider, this probably has some appeal. I'm not saying there aren't great ways to pass the days on the Iron Islands, and you certainly have to give them credit for having a more democratic leadership system than most Westerosi houses. But it's easy to die on the Iron Islands. Mess up in battle, piss off the wrong warrior, or just fail your drowned god, baptism, and you're likely to find yourself feeding the fishes. There are probably safer, if less exciting places to live in Westeros. At number 7, we have the Stormlands. Aside from border disputes, it's a relatively stable region thanks to the long-running rule of House Baratheon, who has watched over the land from their castle at Storm's End since they were installed as the rulers. But in terms of trade, cities, and general things to do, the Stormlands has far less to occupy its residents than its neighbor to the north, King's Landing. That's not to say it doesn't have some appeal. The main feature of the Stormlands is its ecology, from the storms which rack its southern cape to the lush rainwood and the barren marches. There are many notable noble houses there, such as House Tarth, House Selmy, Dondarrion, and of course the Baratheons. If you want to live in a place that has beautiful but temperamental nature, armed conflicts along its borders that never quite escalate to the degree, such as the Riverlands, and a proud history as a key ally to the 7 kingdoms, then the Stormlands may be just the right place for you. At number 6, we have King's Landing and the Crown Lands. The reason the country is called the 7 kingdoms is because that's how many there were when Aegon the Conqueror invaded Westeros, roughly 300 years before the events of the Game of Thrones series. At that time, the Riverlands and the Iron Islands were technically being ruled as one kingdom under King Harren the Black, and King's Landing and its surrounding crown lands hadn't been founded yet. If you want to be where all the important things happen, then King's Landing is the place to be. The bustling city is relatively young in the overall history of Westeros, but since the conquest of King Aegon I, it's grown to become not only the capital of the 7 kingdoms, but a hub of trade, culture, and politics, unrivaled in Westeros. There's plenty to do and see there, but it is a gorgeous city with all the right connections, but being near the seat of power in Westeros, as we have seen, is very volatile. There's a reason that King's Landing has been the site of riots in both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Coming in at number 5, we have the North. Winter isn't for everyone, and winter is always coming if you live in the North. If you don't like cold weather, this one is obviously going to be much lower on your list in Westeros real estate. But you have to balance that con against all the pros. Aside from the rare uprising by a bloodthirsty vassal like the Boltons, the North has great leadership that has allowed its many houses to thrive. And if you live there, you could too, with the reassurance that you had a ruler who would actually hear out your petitions in an honorable fashion. The North also has a lot of space. It's roughly the size of the other 6 kingdoms combined. So if you don't want neighbors, the North is the place for you. At number 4, we have the Vale of Arryn, which is a beautiful land of dramatic hills and valleys to the east of the Riverlands. The Vale has a lot of natural beauty and a long history that goes back to the original kingdoms of the Andals. The most notable feature of the Vale is that it's almost entirely ringed in by the towering mountains of the moon. So getting to the Vale is not easy, which means that invading it isn't either. There's a reason that most wars in Westeros hardly touch its rich soil. Of course, the drawback is the seclusion, and depending on how inclined you are to journey out to other lands. The Vale is a perfect spot if you want to leave your life behind and go cosplay as a Stardew Valley character, building a home without fear of schemes of great lords and ladies destroying your life's work. Number 3, we have the Westerlands. They are a domain of House Lannister of Castle Rock, and it's a pretty good option for where to build your keep. With verdant fields and rolling hills, rich natural resources that range from mines to forests filled with game, a strong economy, and port at Castle Rock that connects it to the rest of the 7 kingdoms, the Westerlands seem to have it all. Even the weather's pretty mild and temperate without being as balmy as the southern regions, or as cold and damp as the north and the Riverlands. Really only the main drawback to living in the Westerlands is knowing you're on the wrong side of history most of the time. The Lannisters don't have a reputation for being the most noble of the noble houses, often serving their own interests above all else. Sometimes that makes for canny rulers like Tywin, who was very good at his job. At other times, you end up with power-hungry fops like Jason Lannister. At number 2, we have Dorne. Dorne, the country which lies at the very southern edge of Westeros. Dorne was famously done quite dirty on Game of Thrones, which cut out many of the cultural complexities that make the nation so rich in George Martin's written works. But, just like the North, we remember. Dorne is made up of sandy deserts, mountain passes, and majestic castles set in dramatic locations. It has spicy food, more forthright people, and societal norms that are miles ahead of the rest of Westeros. The main thing that makes Dorne so appealing are its people and culture, and unlike the rest of the 7 kingdoms, the Dornish were never conquered by Aegon, and their traditions have held for thousands of years. Dorne is very different than the rest of the 7 kingdoms, and its people prove that's a good thing. Life may not always be easy in Dorne, but you can be sure you'll be living it to the fullest. And finally, at number 1, we have the Reach. The Reach is the home to House Tyrell, and if anywhere in Westeros can be said to resemble a storybook fantasy kingdom, it's here. The Reach is situated between the Westerlands and Dorne, and it's the most populous and powerful kingdom in Westeros. From its immense natural resources to its cities, the Reach is known as a hub of culture and trade, and as a breadbasket for the entirety of the 7 kingdoms. By the time of Game of Thrones, it has even eclipsed the Westerlands as the wealthiest kingdom. The Reach simply has it all: a pleasant climate, cities like Old Town, which are hubs of culture, music, and knowledge, gorgeous landscapes, trade routes, which connect it to a number of other locations, and more. If you want to open up a vineyard or simply forget about your worries by basking in the sun in a relative secure area, there really is nowhere better in Westeros than the Reach. And with both Old Town and Highgarden providing lots of opportunity, the Reach is not only a beautiful place, but a happening spot as well. So what are the drawbacks of the Reach? It doesn't really have any that I can think of. Why wouldn't you want to live there? And that concludes the list of ranking kingdoms, from the worst place to live to the best place to live. That is my personal list. What would you change, and where would you want to live? Before you go, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Thanks for watching.